Hello, this is BBC World News. I'm Lucy Gray. Our top stories. Boris Johnson is about to address people in the UK about the latest plans to stop the spread of the coronavirus in the UK. This is the scene live from Downing Street, where he's expected to appear shortly. President Trump says he'll use measures to stop illegal immigration, which he said created a perfect storm in combination with the virus.
Left unchecked, this would cripple our immigration system, overwhelm our healthcare system, and severely damage our national security. We're not going to let that happen.
Spain becomes the fourth country to register more than 1,000 deaths from coronavirus. In Italy, where the death toll has overtaken China's, the virus is spreading south. Doctors are under increasing pressure. Globally, the pandemic has now killed more than 10,000 people, more than half of them in Europe. Welcome to BBC World News. The worldwide total of deaths from the coronavirus pandemic has risen above 10,000. Latest figures from Johns Hopkins University in the United States show the number of infections has now passed 250,000. While in Spain, the number of deaths topped 1,000. We'll have updates on the outbreaks from across the globe in a moment. But for now, let's concentrate on the situation here in the UK, where the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, is expected to give his daily briefing from Downing Street in a few moments. And we will, of course, bring you that when it happens. But let's first speak to our health correspondent, Richard Galpin. Just remind us of where we are with things in the UK at the moment, Richard.
Well, there's a whole series of measures. Social isolation is probably the key one. But the point about it, unlike probably other countries around the world, is that it's not being enforced. It's not obligatory. It's up to people to do this. The Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, has been speaking in these daily press conferences, appealing to people to keep their distance, not to go to pubs and bars and things. But clearly,
they're still going. People are still going.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going back home yesterday and could see a number of people in a pub on the route back. So people haven't been doing it. Obviously, we can't quantify that, but certainly it's not been a sort of full everybody doing what the government's been asking. So we may see some more stringent measures being announced by the Prime Minister in the coming minutes. We don't know. Obviously, we're waiting to hear what he's going to say.
And meanwhile, we're hearing complaints from health workers in one London hospital in particular, London being particularly badly affected at the moment compared to the rest of the country, saying they're struggling to cope already.
Yes, and beyond that, this is particularly has been a critical incident announced by a hospital in North London. They are saying that already they have run out of beds. They're being swamped by the numbers who are coming into that hospital. And this is exactly what health officials, experts have been desperately trying to prevent. They do not want this situation because obviously, this is only one hospital, but if it were to go further than that and the NHS, the whole health system becomes overwhelmed, then you are in an extremely bad place.
It's in particular the intensive care units, isn't it, that people are talking about?
Yes, absolutely, because that's where people generally are taken to. If you're found to have coronavirus, you've got really bad symptoms, then you will be into the intensive care units, of course.
Yeah. We're just keeping an eye on what's going on at Downing Street. We can see the podiums are out at the moment. Boris Johnson has been giving these daily briefings and as you say, he's been talking about sort of advice rather than compelling people to do things. I suppose that people are expecting maybe some sort of change in that now. And we're also expecting talk of more offers of financial help for workers. There's been concern, hasn't there, about there not being enough so far done for people who are perhaps self-employed.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go. Well, hold that thought for a minute, Richard, because we'll just go to Downing Street to listen to the Prime Minister.
Thank you for coming again. Today I'm joined by the Chancellor of the Exchequer, Rishi Sunak, and Jenny Harries, Deputy Chief Medical Officer. Yesterday I set out the ambition of this government to turn the tide against coronavirus within 3 months, and I want to repeat that determination today. We're going to do it with testing, we're going to do it with new medicines and new digital technology that will help us to see the disease as it is transmitted and thereby, by illuminating it, to stamp it out. And above all, now we're going to defeat this disease with a huge national effort to slow the spread by reducing unnecessary social contact. And I want to thank everybody for following the guidance we issued on Monday to stay at home for 7 days if you think you have the symptoms, for 14 days if anyone in your household has either of the symptoms, a new continuous cough or a high temperature, to avoid pubs, bars, clubs and restaurants, to work from home if at all possible. Keep washing your hands. And I know it's been tough, and I know it has been inconvenient, but these actions that we're all taking together are helping to take the strain off our NHS. And bit by bit, day by day, by your actions, your restraint and your sacrifice, we are putting this country in a better and stronger position where we will be able to save literally thousands of lives of people of all ages, people who don't deserve to die now, people whose lives can, must and will be saved. And as we take these actions together and as we make these sacrifices, we can see the impact on the real economy already. Fantastic British companies already under huge strain, big and small. Workers who are finding that their jobs are under threat or going through no fault of their own. And to all of them, we in government say, we will stand by you. And I say that to companies, remember our joint objective to beat this virus. And we will do everything in our power to help. And in just a minute, Rishi is going to explain how we're going to help workers of all kinds to get through this crisis, supporting you directly in a way that government has never done before, in addition to the package that we've already set out for business. And of course, these measures are intended, these steps that we're taking are intended to be temporary. And of course, I am confident that in time the UK economy is going to bounce back. Of course it is, but I must be absolutely clear with you. The speed of our eventual recovery depends entirely on our ability, our collective ability, to get on top of the virus now. And that means we have to take the next steps on scientific advice, and following our plan, we are strengthening the measures announced on Monday, which you will remember. And already people have made a huge effort to comply with those measures for avoiding unnecessary social contact, but we need now to push down further on that curve of transmission between us. And so, following agreement between all the 4 nations of the United Kingdom, all the devolved administrations, we are collectively telling cafes, pubs, bars and restaurants to close tonight as soon as they reasonably can, and not to open tomorrow. Though, to be clear, they can continue to provide take-out services. We're also telling nightclubs, theatres, cinemas, gyms and leisure centres to close on the same timescale. Now, these are places where people come together, and indeed the whole purpose in many cases of these businesses is to bring people together. But the sad thing is, I'm afraid today, for now, at least physically, we need to keep people apart. And I want to stress that we will review the situation each month to see if we can relax any of these measures. And listening to what I have just said, some people may, of course, be tempted to go out tonight. And I say to you, please don't. You may think that you're invincible, but there is no guarantee that you will get mild symptoms, and you can still be a carrier of the disease and pass it on to others. So that's why, as far as possible, we want you to stay at home. That's how we can protect our NHS and save lives. I know, to repeat, I know how difficult this is and how it seems to go against the freedom-loving instincts of the British people. And I also know I also know how much right now workers and business deserve the financial reassurance that we are giving them. But we will get through this. We will get through it together, and we will beat this virus. And to ram that point home, the more effectively we follow the advice that we are given, the faster this country will stage both a medical and an economic recovery in full. Thank you all very much. I'm going to pass now to Rishi, who's going to explain explain the financial support for workers.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Good afternoon. The economic intervention that I'm announcing today is unprecedented in the history of the British state. Combined with our previous announcements on public services and business support, our planned economic response will be one of the most comprehensive in the world. Let me speak directly to people's concerns. I know that people are worried about losing their jobs, about not being able to pay the rent or mortgage, about not having enough set by for food and bills. I know that some people in the last few days have already lost their jobs. To all those at home right now, anxious about the days ahead, I say this: you will not face this alone. But getting through this will require a collective national effort with a role for everyone to play: people, businesses, government. It's on all of us. To meet our commitment to that effort, I am today announcing a combination of measures unprecedented for a government of this nation. Our plan for people's jobs and incomes will protect people's jobs, offer more generous support to those who are without employment, strengthen the safety net for those who work for themselves, and help people stay in their homes. The first part of our plan is to protect people's jobs. This week, the government has taken unprecedented steps to fight the coronavirus. We have closed schools. We have told people to stay at home to prevent the spread of infection. We are now closing shops, restaurants, bars. Those steps are necessary to save lives. But we don't do this lightly. We know these measures will have a significant economic impact. I have a responsibility to make sure that we protect as far as possible people's jobs and incomes. Today, I can announce that for the first time in our history, the government is going to step in and help to pay people's wages. We're setting up a new coronavirus job retention scheme. Any employer in the country, small or large, charitable or non-profit, will be eligible for the scheme. Employers will be able to contact HMRC for a grant to cover most of the wages of people who are not working but are furloughed and kept on payroll rather than being laid off. Government grants will cover 80% of the salary of retained workers up to a total of £2,500 a month. That's just above the median income. And of course, employers can top up salaries further if they choose to. That means workers in any part of the UK can retain their job even if their employer cannot afford to pay them, and be paid at least 80% of their salary. The coronavirus job retention scheme will cover the cost of wages backdated to March the 1st and will be open initially for at least 3 months, and I will extend the scheme for longer if necessary. I am placing no limit on the amount of funding available for the scheme. We will pay grants to support as many jobs as necessary. And can I put on record my thanks to the Trades Union Congress, the CBI and other business groups for our constructive conversations. We said we would stand together with the British people, and we meant it. We have never had a scheme in our country like this before, and we're having to build our systems from scratch. I can assure you that HMRC are working night and day to get the scheme up and running, and we expect the first grants to be paid within weeks, and we're aiming to get it done before the end of April. But I know that many businesses are hurting now. I've already taken extraordinary measures to make cash available to businesses through loans, grants and guarantees. I can announce today that the Coronavirus Business Interruption Loan Scheme will not be interest-free as previously planned for 6 months. It will now be interest-free for 12 months. And thanks to the enormous efforts of our critical financial services sector, those loans will now be available starting on Monday. And I will announce further measures next week on top of those the Governor and I have already taken to ensure that larger and medium-sized businesses can also access the credit they need. I'm also announcing today further cash flow support through the cash tax system. To help businesses pay people and keep them in work, I am deferring the next quarter of VAT payments. That means no business will pay any VAT from now until the end of June, and you'll have until the end of the financial year to repay those bills. That is a direct injection of over £30 billion of cash to businesses, equivalent to 1.5% of GDP. Let me speak directly to businesses. I know it's incredibly difficult out there. We in government are doing everything we can to support you. We're paying people's wages up to 80% so someone can be furloughed rather than laid off to protect their jobs. We're deferring over £30 billion of taxes until the end of the financial year. We're lending unlimited sums of money, interest-free, for 12 months. We're abolishing business rates altogether this year if you're in hospitality, retail and leisure. We're providing cash grants of £25,000 for small business properties. The government is doing its best to stand behind you, and I am asking you to do your best to stand behind our workers.
That's the Chancellor Rishi Sunak giving a press conference there at Downing Street with the Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Richard Galpin, our health correspondent, is with me. Just sum up what we've heard from Boris Johnson first of all.
Yeah, I mean, it was actually a little bit what we were saying earlier on. It has happened. The government is strengthening its measures. So they are saying that, or they are telling cafes, pubs, bars, nightclubs, gyms, leisure centres, all to close as soon as possible. And they're saying they should not open again tomorrow. So they want this to happen very quickly. So this is another major step being taken by this government to try and suppress the spread of the coronavirus.
And saying that they're going to review this regularly, though, aren't they?
Yeah.
And also, quite significantly, they said the pubs will close tonight, and an appeal from the Prime Minister for people not to go out tonight, saying you're not invincible and you could be spreading it.
Yeah, I think the temptation might be for some people to think, OK, one last bit of fun. And but, as you say, the Prime Minister was pretty stern on that, saying that people should not do that. And obviously they want desperately now that this is actually implemented fully.
You need to ram it home to people. And now just a word then quickly on what Rishi Sunak was saying. Quite a lot of money he was talking about there, wasn't he, for employers, for people that they are retaining, but maybe can't pay themselves.
Yeah, so basically what he's saying is that the government will pay the wages for working people. I mean, that's a huge step. And they're talking about tens of billions of pounds. And it would be basically, they would be able to retain 80% of the workforce, if I understand correctly from what he said. And it would be a total of, the payments would be up to £2,500 per month for workers. So this is significant. And obviously it was absolutely essential because there have been massive amounts for businesses. I think 350 billion it was in the end. And then, but obviously then people started saying, well, hold on, what about the workers themselves, people who do the heavy lifting? So this is why this action has been taken now, that they needed very quickly to start supporting the workforce. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Richard Galpin, our health correspondent. Some breaking news to bring you now. In the last few minutes, Italian authorities have announced that the country's death toll from the virus has jumped by 627 bringing the total number of deaths to 4,032. It's the biggest daily rise since the virus emerged in the country 1 month ago, and comes one day after Italy overtook China as the country to record the highest death toll from the virus. And hospitals in the worst hit areas are overwhelmed, especially in the north of the country. With the latest from Rome, here's Sima Katecha.
Well, some people here in Italy are calling it the 9/11 of Italy because what's happened, the death toll has now surpassed China. And if you look at the population of China and the population of Italy, that's incredibly alarming. China, 1.4 billion people. Here in Italy, 64 million. So questions being asked as to why that's happened here. Most of those fatalities and cases are in the north of the country, where hospitals are incredibly stretched. They're running out of key pieces of kit such as ventilators and face masks. And we know that the Chinese have bought 9 tons of kit with them. Chinese medics have come over with a lot of extra supplies for hospitals in Milan, where they are struggling to cope. Now, there's deep-rooted concern that the outbreak could move from the north to the south, because in recent weeks, tens of thousands of people have made that journey from north to south as they've tried to flee the outbreak. Now, the hospitals in the south are not as well equipped. It's a poorer part of the country, and the government's worried that if the outbreak does move down there, how will those hospitals cope? A priority for the government is to make sure doctors and nurses remain protected from this virus, and the stringent measurements that are in place at the moment, that have been in place for around 11 days, restricting people's movement around the country, well, those stringent measurements could be made even more strict. We heard from the Sports Ministry yesterday saying that at the moment people can go out for a jog, they can walk their dog, they can go to the supermarket. There is a possibility that even those things might not be allowed. So Italy very much aware that it's going to probably get worse before it gets better. Those figures expected to continue rising, but also the agitation among some having to stay in their homes 11 days already, and knowing that those measurements might be in place for another month or so is hard for them to take.
Sima Katecha reporting for us there. Just a reminder of that news that's just broken in the last few minutes. And Italian authorities saying that the country's death toll from coronavirus has jumped 627 just in one day, bringing the number of deaths to more than 4,000. In the past hour, US President Donald Trump says the United States and Mexico will restrict non-essential travel across their shared border in an effort to limit the spread of coronavirus. The president also announced that he would introduce measures to block migrants at America's borders from entering the country illegally in order to protect citizens.
Every week, our border agents encounter thousands of unscreened, unvetted, and unauthorized entries from dozens of countries, and we've had this problem for decades. You know the story, but now it's with the national emergencies and all of the other things that we've declared, we can actually do something about it. We're taking a very strong hold of that, and we have before, but this is now at a level that nobody's ever approached. In normal times, these massive flows place a vast burden on our healthcare system, but during a global pandemic, they threaten to create a perfect storm that would spread the infection to our border agents, migrants, and to the public at large. Left unchecked, this would cripple our immigration system, overwhelm our healthcare system, and severely damage our national security. We're not going to let that happen.
President Trump there. Now, hundreds of thousands of travellers have found themselves stranded because of the coronavirus crisis as airlines cancel flights and cities around the world go into lockdown. The EU alone estimates that over 80,000 people from its member states can't get home. The BBC's travel show has been talking to one British tourist who's found himself stuck in Miami after his flight was cancelled.
My situation is I'm stranded. Virgin cancelled my flight yesterday, due to leave at 6:25 p.m. from Miami, and I was told the day before that of the cancellation. I'm being told that I can book an alternative flight, but I don't know if that's with the same provider. Can I go with a different airline like BA? Will I be reimbursed for doing that? In terms of being in South Beach and the reaction, it's kind of strange. It's very mixed at the moment. There was no social distancing at all in the beginning. Starbucks shut. That's always a sign, right? Starbucks is shut, and then shops were beginning to close. And even then the restaurants, it was like a ghost town. it's just seeing everything change so dramatically around you. And because I'm on foreign soil, I'm not in a familiar situation. So it kind of adds to that anxiety.
Just one of the hundreds of thousands of travellers stranded abroad because of the coronavirus. Just a reminder then of these breaking news lines that have been coming to us in the last few minutes. Then in Italy, the country's death toll has gone up 627 in just one day, bringing the number of cases to more than 4,000. This comes just one day after their number of cases went to more than that of China. And also in the last half hour, we've been hearing from Boris Johnson, the British Prime Minister, talking about how now in the UK, pubs and cafes and restaurants are going to be forced to close. There was advisories before, but this is the first time he said that they're going to be forced to close. Also, gyms, theatres, leisure centres and cinemas will also be closed from tonight. So that's what's been happening in the last half hour. Plenty more on our website. Do stay with us here on BBC World News. It's time for Focus on Africa.